Hello and welcome everyone to our Agile Boston podcast. I'm Joe DeAngelis, and today I am with my good friend Dan LeFebvre, who I've known for a very long time. Dan is starting a new venture. He's a founder of DCL Business Agility. He is a registered Scrum Trainer Fellow, and he is a former transformation consultant at Scrum Inc., working many years side by side with Dr. Jeff Sutherland. And today, Dan and I are going to talk about some recent experiences Dan has had rescuing companies that have been struggling with their agile transformations.
Thank you, Joe. I appreciate being on. Can't wait for the conversation.
So, Dan, you've been working for a long time with a lot of great companies. Capital One comes to mind, that I know you worked with for years. And now, we're seeing a lot of Scrum Masters getting laid off in their jobs, a lot of companies getting fed up with agile transformations, throwing out their consultants and their coaches, and maybe even going back to some traditional ways of doing work. Um, so you've had some good experience recently rescuing some of these companies and getting them back on track. Tell us about it.
Sure. Most of these companies want to do the right thing, but when they've started their agile transformation, usually they didn't do very good change management. People didn't know why they were learning this new way of working. They were forcing teams to just do this new thing, and nothing else in the organization was changing. So if you keep running in the same operating model, you're not necessarily going to get Agile working well. It's kind of like trying to run a Windows application on a Mac, right? So the operating environment of a Mac is not going to run a straight Windows application. You need to change something, right? You need to either change the entire operating system or put in a way to create almost like a virtual system. And that's where a dual operating system can come in, where you can
The
have
dual operating system that Professor Carter talks about in his book.
exactly.
Mhm.
With the network side, which is where you create your the side of the organization that's agile, where you put your Scrum teams or your Agile teams, you would use a real Agile operating model there. Dr. Carter doesn't talk about what you put there, just that it needs to be innovative, right? Like a entrepreneur. In this case, it's like, let's set up our kind of an agile environment, an agile network there.
And he does talk about it being an opt-in too. You
And
get the
definitely
people
an
that want to
opt-in.
be there. Yep.
Absolutely. Having people opt in, asking for volunteers is always a better way to do it. Because whenever you force people to do something, they'll tend to resist, even if it's better for them. I
Mm.
mean, look at kids with eating their vegetables, right? I mean, it's good for them, but if you force
Yeah.
them to do it, it's not really going to work. You can force them to eat cereal, and great, and they still might not like it because you're forcing them to do something, right?
That's right. By the way, I'm like a big kid because I still have to be forced to eat my vegetables. I've I volunteer that.
Yeah, I know, that's fair. That's fair. But hey, sometimes you got to do stuff that's good for you.
Mhm,
If you opt into it, it tends to go down easier.
mhm.
Yeah. So in a lot of these organizations, because they didn't change their operating environment, their budgeting system, their project management meetings, if they have phase gates, their phase gates are all based on this notion of waterfall. That is, that we can predict exactly what's going to happen months in advance. And for standard repeatable work, that might work, like running an IT department that's just, installing a new phone system, stuff like that, that's they've done before. That might work okay. But for R&D, for things that we've never done before, or sometimes no one's ever done before, you can't
Mm,
predict what you're going to run into, right? So
right.
you really got to set up an environment that's different, right? Funding as you go. feedback loops to adjust as you go, finding early adopter customers so that they can try your new product and give you feedback, right? You can keep it in stealth mode, whatever you want to do, but at least find ways to get feedback so that you're building the product that the organization or your customers need rather than what you think they need.
Yeah, and it really comes down to, top-down organizational structures are optimized to repeat the same thing over and over again. They are optimized to do what they've always done.
Correct.
Whereas this agile network is optimized to exercise empiricism. The idea of
Exactly.
doing something, getting it to your customers, getting that feedback, and then figuring out what to do next based on what that feedback tells you. Is that a good way of
Exactly.
looking at it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you need this interface between the network side and the hierarchy side so that the hierarchy side is getting what they need in a way that doesn't impede the network side, right? And that's where senior leaders who are opted into the dual operating system, into creating agility in their R&D efforts, that's where they step up and do their job. And the Scrum Masters or your facilitators in the network have to help. They have to raise those impediments. They have to move things out of the way. They have to help modify the internal product development processes to become more flexible, empirical, rather than predictable, which is where they were before. Because R&D, as much as you'd like it to be predictable, there's so many unknowns that it can't be that precise in its predictability.
So if I'm a leader and I'm frustrated right now because I spent millions of dollars on consultants and coaches, and I've got scrum masters and product owners, but I'm not seeing the results that I should see, where do I start? How do I start changing things and getting movement in the right direction?
Yeah, so first you have to be very clear on what you want to accomplish, because the goal is never to install Scrum or get Agile working. The goal is to deliver business results. And we got to make that really, really clear that we're trying to generate these business results. Okay. What measures do you need to optimize in order to make this work? And then start inviting folks into the conversation on how we create that environment. Okay. And then you start creating this area where, if R&D is the place where we want to focus, we start saying, how do we create these feedback loops? Because the next thing I think about is, what feedback loops do we need in our system and our operating environment in order to adjust as we go to adapt to this world that's very volatile and uncertain and
Mm.
complex, right? What's the term, VUCA? With
Right.
ambiguous. um, you got to have those feedback loops, because without that feedback loop, you're pretty much flying blind, right? There's no empiricism. You're pretending that you know what's going to happen 5 years from now, but then we have a pandemic, or then we have a supply chain issue, or then there's a change in the political climate, and now inflation's through the roof, so we can't count on the things we need to count on, or whatever uncertain thing in the world happens. You need to adjust quickly, and without this feedback loop, without that empirical system, it becomes a real big challenge to do that.
So, so as a leader, I want to create an empirical process in my development, whether it's software, whether it's any type of product, really. Anything that
Correct.
I don't know what the answer is, or I don't know how to do it, but I have a starting point. I want to exercise empiricism. What are some of the common obstacles that you've seen leaders face as they try to institute that empirical process within their organization?
Yeah, I mean, one of the common ones is not getting the entire leadership team aligned,
Yeah.
right? So maybe just the VP of engineering wants to do it, but VP of product management that doesn't want that. He wants to have some specifics and some commitments and things like that, which are impossible. So that's one of the big ones, right? It's not getting everybody aligned, because you do need the senior leaders of the organization aligned on where we're headed.
Not just on the
Otherwise,
engineering side, but on the business side.
on the business side, the whole senior team needs to say, this is where we're going. This is why we need to go there. And here's how you can help, right? And get everyone involved.
That's a good point. The fourth Agile principle, I believe, is the business and IT working together daily. It's not just at the team level. It's
No.
at every level in the organization, isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, if you're talking about R&D product development, you need product management on board. You probably need operations on board if you're doing kind of a SaaS kind of product. You need manufacturing on board if you're doing a hardware product, because they're going to receive things differently than they used to before. They're going to receive things more incrementally. And they have to be ready for that. We may want to go out to customers sooner. So that's another approach that either marketing or sales may need to look differently at how we do business development in that space with these brand new products. So there's a lot of changes that happen in an organization when you think about, we have to use a different operating model.
Right. And then is it just at the senior level? Once you get that buy-in, I would imagine you have to get that continuity all the way down the management chain. Is that right?
Yes, you do, but it probably won't happen immediately. What you really want to build initially is how do we start small? Okay, so now we're all aligned. This is where we're headed. Let's get a set of volunteers to start this network up, right? This an entrepreneurial way of working, right? Part of that is teaching them how to be empirical. Part of that is empowering them with decentralized decision making to make that happen. Creating the interface between the traditional part of the organization and this new agile part of the organization, so that the communication between them is clear, makes sense, and then get them going. And I know a lot of people scoff at asking for volunteers, because we need product A to be agile, so let's make everybody in project A agile. But again, like we mentioned earlier, if you don't get people to opt in, it's not going to work very well. And really, it's based on kind of the old technology adoption curve that Jeff Moore used to talk about back in the 80s. Anytime a new change happens, people react differently to change. Some love it. Some of it are leery of it. Nobody likes to be changed, so you want people to opt in to be changed. So in the technology adoption curve, they say there's like 15% of the population that just thrives on change, loves trying new things, want to be the first on there. They'd be the first one who bought the Apple, iPhone way back when. They'd be the first one who's going to try the new Apple Vision Pro, because they just like to try new things, whether or not it's a problem, right? But part of that 15% also want to solve problems. The new technology they love to try. So if you get them to try Agile, they'll work through those problems in the organization that causes it to not work well, so they can fix it, improve it. That next group of people, what they call the early majority, which is about half of your organization, they would use new things if they knew it would work or make their life better. So they need to see it working. They need to see it delivering value before they opt into it. And that's what that first 15% with those volunteers fixing all kind of the organizational resistance and process impediments that might exist. And once they see that working, they'll opt in. So you can ask for another round of volunteers. They'll more than likely opt in, and you'll get more of the people you want to be working on the new initiatives.
So get alignment.
And you'll have some people in the organization that'll never opt in, and maybe this isn't for them, or maybe the kind of work they want to do isn't R&D. It's not unpredictable. So there's lots of work in
Yeah, or
organization that
maybe they're working on a product that's maybe in maintenance mode that doesn't need empiricism at this point, and that's
exactly,
fine because that's important work as well. I was going
exactly.
to ask you, so we're starting out getting our executive leadership on the IT and the business side aligned. We're
Yep.
finding a product or a solution or a feature or something that could benefit from the empirical process. We're gathering volunteers to work in an agile way, maybe even adopt Scrum uh, to exercise that empiricism for that particular project.
Yep.
Now I'm a Scrum Master and I'm in that project. A lot of Scrum Masters have come to me and they're worried. They're saying, "Hey, I'm seeing people getting laid off. Is Scrum dying?" Uh, I don't think the answer is Scrum's dying. I agree with you. I think that people have not really understood the benefits of Scrum or the purpose of Scrum, and therefore they're not exercising it. As a Scrum Master, what can I do to maximize the value that I'm delivering to the organization so that, I feel good about my job and so does everybody else around me?
Yeah. So it's twofold. One, when it's starting out, your focus on the team is around how do I help them become a self-managing team where they don't need me to move the Jira cards or they don't need me to facilitate a daily scrum or any of that stuff, right? Let them learn to be self-managing and then focus your effort on how do we streamline the operating model, the process, so that cycle time gets reduced, quality improves. In one organization, the Scrum Master was a developer, but what he focused on, it wasn't him, he focused on building the CI/CD pipeline for the team because they never had time to do that. But those are the things, the kind of development he focused on to get a good unit test system in place, to make sure the pipeline's working, um, so that the team could focus on that capability and functionality. And that's how he was um, removing waste in this system, right? And then as a Scrum Master, make those savings visible. If you have a regular sprint review, which you should, and you bring stakeholders there, which you should, you might show that we've reduced the waste by so much. You've increased the throughput by so much. You've improved the quality by so much. Have a dashboard so that people can look at the dashboard and say, okay, so our agile transformation has improved our ability to deliver by this percent.
And
Um,
that's so critical because you can't exercise empiricism if you can't deliver.
correct.
I'm not talking just delivering once a sprint. I'm talking multiple times a sprint if needed.
Exactly, exactly. And then the empiricism goes everywhere, right? Because you want to have metrics that show that we're heading in the right direction, that the process changes we're making are actually making a difference. Make them visible. And as a Scrum Master, if you're the one making them visible, you're suggesting the changes, they will see the value in that role or
And really,
accountability.
and
And
really,
remember, Scrum Master is an accountability. So it doesn't have to be a title that you attach a person to that eventually, when you think you don't need him anymore, you can let go. It's an
hmm.
accountability you take on. So you don't necessarily have to change your title. You could be the principal software engineer and have the accountability of the Scrum Master and do the things that Scrum Master is supposed to do. I'm working now with an organization where the first line managers are going to be the Scrum Masters. And the thing I have to keep reminding them is, remember, very good managers still facilitate their teams. They still get obstacles out of the way. They are responsible for and should be growing the skills of their team. They're not there to command and control the team. That's not a good manager. That's a micromanager, not a good manager. Good managers do what Scrum Masters do. So there's nothing that should prevent a manager from being a good Scrum Master. And they're less likely to be laid off because you need managers in the organization. And if you're doing the right thing, clearing impediments, streamlining the process, helping your team grow, everyone will be.
And I think that's the final thing that I want to highlight is that management by definition means to control a situation, to manage a situation. What we want are leaders who serve. We want
Correct.
leaders that get other people to follow them and also serve those people. Like you just said, that an engineer who took on the accountability of Scrum Master first thing, he did was, hey, we got to figure out a way to release frequently. Let me go build out a CI/CD pipeline.
Yep,
That's exactly the type of value that you can offer a team in an
exactly,
organization.
exactly.
So Dan, how do people find you, and how do people reach out to you, and maybe even uh, get you to come visit their sites and help save them from their
Sure.
lost or stuck
Yeah.
in agile transformations?
You can actually schedule a free 30-minute consultation with me if you go to my website, which is DCLBA for Business Agility, DCLBA.com. Right on the first page, it'll show my mission and it'll say schedule an appointment with me. And we can do a 30-minute free consultation to see where you're at and what help you might need and see what we can do together.
That's fantastic, and I highly recommend you do that. Dan is my go-to person when I need help, and he's always there, and he always has the right answer. So I definitely uh, endorse you going out to see Dan, have that conversation, and see how he can help you, because I know he will. Dan,
Thank
thank you
you, Joe.
so much. It's been a pleasure to see you,
My
and
pleasure.
and uh, and everyone, if you want to see more podcasts like this, subscribe to our YouTube channel, Agile Boston. You also go to agileboston.org to check out what's coming up. We have a great in-person event coming up on June 6th in Burlington, Massachusetts at the Microsoft building. We have Ryan Ripley and Todd Miller from Agile for Humans. You see them all over YouTube, and also Patricia Kong. All three are co-authors of the book, Unlocking Business Agility with Evidence-Based Management. So I highly recommend you come out to see us there at the Microsoft building, June 6th at 5:30 p.m. Until then, Dan, thank you again for all your wonderful wisdom here in this podcast, and
Very
we'll see
welcome.
you all very soon. Take care, everyone.
Bye now.